to module 3 of understanding governance sessions. And today we have got a guest with us, Carolyn Paddy. Carolyn is an occupational therapist and she's also a service manager. Carolyn has got around 20 years of experience in banking, and now she is working as an occupational therapist and a manager in one of the NGOs. So welcome, Carolyn.
Thanks, Hash.
And we are great to have. It's great to have you today. So this is an opportunity for us, if you like, to have a conversation about your experience on governance. And I know financial. You have got a strong financial background with around 20 years in banking services, and and this will be an opportunity for our participants of the governance modules to know more about the financial side of governance and how and the significance of it in that process. So one of the things I wanted to know firstly from you is, uh, so what was your first experience in in getting on a board or in a governance role, and just your reflection on how did it go, what were the challenges, or what were the opportunities. So yeah, just wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I was on the Occupational Therapy New Zealand Whakaora Nanaho Aotearoa Council from September 2016 to 2018. I was originally approached to stand in 2015. However, it was another year before I felt comfortable standing for election. During that time, I had sort of moments of why have they approached me, or what value would I add? But just on reflection about that, the people that will shoulder tap you or ask you to consider this, they obviously are encouraging you and wanting to nominate you because they believe you have the experience in the roles, and they've identified that you have skills that will benefit the organisation. So in the year between being approached and being elected, I took that time to just learn more about the association, because at that stage I'd only been an occupational therapist for about 4 years, and more specifically, due to it only recently being implemented and the uniqueness of the treaty relationship governance model. So I wanted to just find out and make sure that I was informed before even considering standing. So whilst I'd anticipated there'd be work involved with being a council member, I underestimated the time and the regularity of that input that was required. So initially, I found that quite challenging, but due to the other council members around me being experienced and really willing to share their knowledge, I felt well supported while I found my feet. So I think it took probably most of the first year before I felt somewhat comfortable in the role, but yeah, the opportunities that it's brought me since then, it'd be a really valuable thing to do.
Thanks for sharing your thoughts, Carolyn. And yes, I can relate to it. When I was first nominated for a board, and I was thinking, why are they nominating me? Like I had never been on a board. And then I thought, oh, maybe if they have nominated me, they would have thought about it, what I can bring to the board. So yeah, I think this is a common story with people who get on a board, isn't it? Sometimes you get nominated and people see things in you, and then you get out there and yeah, so no, that's great to hear that from you. One of the things which I found it when I got on a board was, like for example, financial management skills. So when you get those board papers, you get those profit and loss sheets and all that, and these numbers can be scary, especially for people who are coming from a non-financial background, and for me it was initially. I'll be honest here. How do you think it is important to have that aspect in governance?
Yeah, I did sort of, until you'd asked me to do this, Hash, I didn't really think about, because my experience was, in banking. Yeah, but on reflection, I think it is really important for people stepping up to a council to have some understanding of financial management, because just the reflection of that is, as the part of the council, along with the CE or ED, you're responsible for setting the organisation's strategy, which includes the finances. So once that strategy is set, you need to, there's ongoing monitoring required of the budget, and that requires to keep the strategy on track. So if you don't understand what you're reading, you may miss if there's unexpected events or deviations that have occurred in the annual forecast, and which, that can compound problems, really. So yes, I think it is useful. If you're in a leadership role, a management service, there may be that you've already managed budgets, so that would be a healthy start. But yeah, just the financial statements, not many people would have had access to those in the past, so that takes a little bit more work. But
Yeah,
not
yeah.
unachievable.
Yes, and especially for example, if we talk about a health profession association where members would be health professionals like occupational therapists or physiotherapists, and they would not necessarily have that skill, and they all may not be manager, but
No.
still we need sometimes voice of people at the front line,
Yes,
to that
definitely.
voice to come to the board. So how do you think, like for someone like who is a frontline clinician, has never managed, a budget, or does not have a basic, fund. Of course, we all manage budget at home and do all that, that's a different thing, but not in a work context. What do you think? Which basic skills they need and how they can gain them? Is it possible to learn these things, in a short time frame? Or yeah, I just wanted your thoughts on that, Carolyn.
Okay, I think a short time frame might be a bit optimistic, but like over a little bit of time, you can build up things. So when you're looking at financial accounts, there's a few different parts to the document. So the profit and loss statement includes your revenue and your expenses for the organisation over the year, and then you have a balance sheet. So a balance sheet is a snapshot at the conclusion of the financial year, and that includes the assets and liabilities, and then if there's a surplus or deficit for the year, and then the overall position of the organisation is called either the equity or total accumulated funds. So the financial statements will also include this year's information along with the previous years. So having a comparison to support you to identify if there's any extraordinary source of income or expenses have occurred is really useful. So the other thing within the reports, there are notes, so they can explain the reason for the difference. But if you aren't able to identify that, it's prudent to ask the auditor. So another document that's useful to understand is, we've talked about that just recently, budget, or the cash flow statement, it can also be called. So this is a forecast document of the timing of revenue and expenses during the year. So this document will also be amongst the council papers that you'll need to review prior to a meeting. So when I was on the council previously, I always made a point of reviewing this budget as soon as practical, so that if I did have any questions or needed to clarify information, I could check in with the ED too, and then that also allows them the opportunity to investigate and provide an answer if they haven't got that immediately available. And the other thing is that this can then be shared with the other council members before the meeting, because they too may have a similar question, so getting that answered is useful. The other thing that's why that's useful is it means that when you get to the meeting and it's time to review the budget, it can be covered in a much more timely manner. So because I had previous experience in this area, I didn't seek outside support, but just I've done a little bit of research and preparation for this, and I found on the New Zealand government business website, there's actually a page called How to Read Financial Statements, and there's a range of documents and videos in there that you might find helpful. So we can provide that link. The other resource I'd recommend, if it's possible, is to seek the support of your existing or previous council members. If the previous person that's been like if you go into an audit and finance role, or even just as a councillor, they may have been on there for some time and they've built up some tips that they found really useful when they're learning those skills. So yeah, there's in governance particularly for the health roles and things, people are there to support each other. They're there for the benefit of organisations. So they, it's quite a good relationship, and that helps building it by supporting each other with your different skills.
Thanks, Carolyn. So I mean, I think key messages for me from here would be, so you talked about 3 documents. One is profit and loss sheet and the balance sheet. And then you also talked about budget. Am I right? Or
yeah,
these were the 3 documents you mainly talked about. Sorry, did I interrupt you?
No. Yeah, I was just going to say that. Yeah, so the budget you would look at more regularly than the balance sheet and the profit and loss statement, which is an annual event.
Yeah. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So balance sheet is more like a health of an organization, right? At a time.
Yes, definitely.
So balance sheet it is like a cross section of the financial health. So you take a balance sheet today, you can take it after say a month, and then you can compare how was the health like. Is that what balance sheet? Yeah.
Generally, they're only done at the end of the financial year, but yes, technically you could.
Yeah. And then you talked about deviations, Carolyn. So if you're on a board, the papers come to you, and of course you try to do it beforehand so that you're prepared. What kind of deviations would be a red flag for you? Let's say 10% deviation or 15%, or the quality of it, or?
Yeah, probably a percentage is probably a bit hard and fast to do it. It's like it depends on the size of your organisation, because sometimes like a big organisation, it might be thousands of dollars, but it may be that there's a particular expense is only up a few $100s, but it might be quite a large percentage. But then that unexpected expenses from your strategy, if there hasn't been communication about things happening between the council and the ED, well then it's just like an opportunity to what's been happening here. Because potentially if something's starting to be worked on that's costing money, it could be an ongoing expense, so you might need to allow for that and adjust expenses elsewhere.
And one interesting thing is that I remember on council, when one of the board members questioned that why there was an underspend. So this was for professional development, and they question underspend means there is something wrong. You should be actually doing professional development. So underspend can be a red flag as well.
Yep. Just any variations over or under, because obviously like part of the role of setting a budget is aligning what your strategy is, and like the example you've used, if you're not spending money on your staff's professional development, that's not a good thing, because if there's been money in the budget allocated for that, it means then there's been a need identified. So if that's not being worked on, then potentially that could cause problems elsewhere.
Yeah. Now talking about the budget, Carolyn, so I understand a budget is a best guess you can make. isn't it?
That's a good description. Yeah, yeah,
And
because you can't, yeah. It's only, I mean, the things like, I mean, who, just for example, who would want to make a budget for like the building industry at the moment? It's just a cost of going up, weekly or monthly. So yeah, it is. But then that's an opportunity at your council meetings, that if there is something that hasn't been anticipated, either over or under, usually it's if you're overspending, it causes more problem than under. Then that gives you an opportunity to adjust your plan, really, to because a budget can be, if you need to adjust it. Most people don't, but they just allow for knowing that at the end of the year that is going to be different. So, but it's not going to be a surprise at the end of the year then.
Yeah. And please correct me if I'm wrong. So once you set budget, it stays there. You do not change your budget as you go, isn't it?
It's usually set for a year.
Estimate.
Yeah. And probably bigger companies, they could do it quarterly.
All right.
But in the the role I was in, it was set. And it's usually months before. So if your financial year is the end of March, it needs to be in place well before the beginning of that financial year. So you're not setting it in April or May. It needs to be done potentially at the end of the year, and it all set in place, so you know what your plan is for that next ongoing year.
Yeah. So I'm just trying to visualize it so that even the participants who are new to governance can get a sense of it. So when you are on a board, usually a week before, or maybe 2-3 days before, you will get board papers and you will get these financial statements, and you would need to review it. And as you said, it is very important to be prepared. Now, one thing, look, we have served on a board together, Carolyn. One thing I liked about you is that you used to give the CEO or the executive director a heads up, before, sending your notes about the budget, maybe a couple of nights, in advance, so that the ED comes prepared in the board meeting with answers, or even emails answers to you. It can be really frustrating when people have not gone through these papers and start getting to the nitty-gritty of it in the board meeting, and that wastes a lot of time.
Yes, there's always lots on the agenda. I mean, the financial aspect is only just one part of it. So if you're going through things that could be, and the other thing is sometimes the chief executive will need time to because it might have happened, if your meetings are quarterly, it could have happened in the first month of that quarter, and he might not readily be able to recall that. Building a really good working relationship with the ED is key in a governance role, because you're working for the organisation. You want to be on the same path, and having those good relationships makes that much easier. So
Thanks, Carolyn. Another thing which I have in my mind is that, and being a person with a finance background, I thought I'll discuss with you. In some organizations they will have a treasurer, and while in others they have an audit and finance committee. So what is the difference? Or which is better than the other? Having one treasurer, or you have a whole committee, or what are your thoughts on this?
Treasurers probably more your perhaps community organisations. You have someone looking after the money, but when you've got an organisation or a company that you're in a governance role, the title like audit and finance. So they've got that committee has the responsibility for the general risk of the oversight of the organisation, and that's not that includes but not limited to internal and external risks that could lead to legal, economic, political customer suppliers, operations stuff. As when I was in the audit and finance chair role, because my background was finance, that was my focus. But just reflecting on that time, that I now understand that it's actually important to have an understanding and oversight of all areas of risk. So one of the things that I thought about is having, like we used to have separate audit and finance meetings prior to the full council meeting. And one of those things is that is achieved, it ensures that sound practices are being followed by management. An important member of that committee is an accountant. So they can provide you at that time with expert advice, and if there's upcoming changes in policies or within the environment during the year that may affect the organisation. So depending on the sort of organisation you're in, the end of year financial accounts may need to be completed by an auditor. So if good management practices is in place, the end of year financial accounts should be able to be finalised in the office and sent off to the auditor within 2 months of that financial year. So if the operational management side aren't able to do that, and then the auditing of the reports is delayed, potentially if there's problems identified when they're collating that information, again, additional time is going to have passed, and that may have the capacity to compound the issue. Another facet I thought of, in the Audit and Finance Committee's role is reviewing the organisation's policies, particularly in the areas of ethics, conflict of interest and fraud, and potentially litigation and regulatory proceedings. So, and probably most New Zealand governance roles are largely volunteers. I'd recommend that for some of these instances that legal advice or expert advice is sought, because whilst there's a cost to obtaining that advice, in the long run it may be more costly to the organisation if you continue to go down the incorrect path. So it's quite an important role that needs focus.
Yeah, it is. It is quite an important role, and I think Audit and Finance Committee is definitely, to me, it sounds as a good practice, isn't it? Especially if you are even a medium-sized organization. I would say even small organizations, they need to have that audit and finance insight. And as you said, having an accountant on that committee, basically it's another line of defense, basically, that ensures you that there is someone who is looking at from an accountant lens. And you also touched on the role of an auditor. So for some, in a common language, so I'm trying to simplify it. So for example, so what I understand is having an account audited is a regulatory requirement, isn't it? You
Yes.
need to have that.
Yeah.
And it is kind of an external audit to see how you have been managing your accounts. Correct?
Yes. And that has to be, if you're a company, it has to be registered at the company's office, or if you're an incorporated society, that has to be lodged with them. So they, so there's checks and balances. So everybody is following their rules and procedures.
Yeah. And these auditors they're available. They have their own private practices. You can go and approach them and give them a contract to do audit, yes. Right?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm trying to talk about each step. So because now our participants, some of them, they have not even started in a governance role, so that it makes it clear for them. Yeah.
Yeah. So an auditor is probably like, you have your accountants, and then auditors probably have to do additional training to have that extra level of experience, and they would need to be registered and have guidelines that, code of ethics and things that they have to abide by. So it's that additional level of expertise, and then you can have there's auditors for financial accounts, and then if there's any challenge, well, if there's any fraud or things discovered, you also have forensic auditors, so then they can delve further and investigate if there's been any wrongdoing in organisations, and if there's potential that there may need to be legal avenues sought.
So what I'm understanding is usually an auditor would rely on the papers and documents provided by the company or the organization, and looking at those documents, if they feel like, oh, there's something fishy there or something needs to be further investigated, they might suggest a forensic audit. Is that correct?
Yes. And that, and whilst I said before that could be costly, if you've had a staff member or a contractor or whatever stealing money, obviously you need to try and address that. So it may be still happening. So that's the other thing, is that they may be able to understand how that's occurring and stop that.
And it is likely that if the auditor is not given the correct documents, the auditor will never know what is happening, isn't it? Is that?
That's potentially correct. That's because some people are quite clever at the way they things, so it can be quite challenging to uncover.
Yeah. Thanks. And I liked how you have suggested some resources for our participants, the business website, and some basics of it. And I remember when we went on council, we were given a basic information sheet on how to read financials, and that was quite helpful too. So usually in my experience, when we are not related with accounts or we have minimal understanding of financial management, we do not pay really attention to the annual reports of, say, for example, AA. They send us their annual report every year, or on all those companies whom we interact with. My health insurance company sends me an annual report, but if I'm more mindful, I'll go through those reports, and that is an opportunity to actually look at the financial report and see what does it say, and that can be an opportunity for people to learn even.
Yes. And when you're a part of a member organisation, it's really important to understand what your subscription is being used for. Some people just look at the what the assets were last year and the liabilities and your overall position, and if there's a profit, they might think, oh, that's okay. But it could be that the organisation during that year spent some money on something that is not really good use of that organisation's money. So it is, in an ideal world, that doesn't happen, but everybody needs to be accountable. So, and that's why we have, management, and then we have governance. But then, members, it's their organisation. So, I've always, I've been a member of the occupational therapy association since a student, because I felt that it's not just about there's the whole belonging to the community. And the financials are just one part of that.
Yeah. Now I had a couple of more questions for you. The next one is more related to your professional career, Carolyn. Our participants would be really interested to know that I think you have got years of financial background, and then you came to occupational therapy. What was that motivated you to take that decision?
Well, there was a long way about it, really. When I left school, I applied to go nursing, and I never got accepted. It was in the timing when they were changing over from politics. There were some hospitals still doing it, and I didn't get in. And I thought, oh, okay, what am I going to do now? And I'd had a part-time job in a dairy while I was at school. And a couple of the bank staff came in there and they said, oh, we have a job going. And because I'd had 4 years work experience, I interviewed for the job and got it. So, yeah, but then once I'd finished, when I had my children, I did some teacher, well, I was parent help initially, and then I did some teacher aid work at school. And at that stage, the education, part of that sort of triggered a little spark. And the teachers wanted me to go to teachers college, but that didn't appeal to me. So, and then I sort of took another sidestep in that my husband, he had retrained as a property valuer. So I ran our business for 11 years. So that experience, with my banking experience and things, that sort of took me off on that path. And then I decided that I didn't want to do that forever. So I started looking at opportunities for to go and do some study. So I went and saw a careers person, and at that stage, the occupational therapy school wasn't there. That and social work came up. And then they advertised to start the Otago Polytech started a school at Wintec in Hamilton. And my auntie is a teacher, and she said, oh, this is what occupational therapists do. So, I'd had no contact with the profession up till that stage. And I went along to the information evening and started doing some research and applied. So, but all of those other skills are really useful in my occupational therapy career. So, I'm really happy that I made the change.
And I'm happy that you made the change, because we can have an asset like you in our profession and in healthcare, as at a wider level, because as we need that diversity of expertise in healthcare.
And all of those, whenever you're, it doesn't matter what role you're in, really, you're working with people. So those skills for building rapport with the people you work with is really useful.
Absolutely. Now, at last, I wanted to get your message for our participants, and especially for those participants. I know that as you know, in these modules, around 70 people are registered, and looking at their profile, I see some of them are experienced in governance, but many of them have never been in a governance role. And I can see some of them are also, they want to develop their leadership, managerial skills as well. And I see, financial management as something which people find quite scary, and that is a reason, that is a barrier for them to get into a leadership role. They want to be leaders, but at the same time, when you see, they have to manage budget and finance and all that scares them. What would be a message for them, those leaders who want to be leaders, who can offer a lot, but there is a hesitation that, oh, I cannot do it? What would be a message for them?
I don't think that's the case at all. I think that's one part of it, but it's a skill that we can all learn. Maths, financial accounts are patterns, and you're looking for those just differences from year to year, and just having conversation and asking lots of questions. People that know me know I do that in all areas of my life, not just in financial management. So it's, be inquisitive, be curious. People are really willing to help. So it is definitely, it looks scary, but if you break it down a bit like the elephant, taking one bite at a time, it is achievable. So just takes time.
Thank you very much. Yeah, this is a great message for all of us. Thank you very much, Carolyn. It has been a pleasure having this conversation with you.
Yeah, that's
cool.
Have
a nice rest of the day.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.